Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name's Samantha Pilz, and we will be going through how to keep DiSC alive. So we will get started shortly. It's about 2 minutes to 11. And while we for everyone to join us, we're just going to put a couple of poll questions up for you. So if you can answer these would be great. The first one, just really nice and basic. We'd like to know what everyone's DiSC style is. So that one's up on your screen now. And then we're also going to have a second one at this stage, which is when was the last time you used DiSC? And by this, what I mean is it can be anything from the last time that you looked at a DiSC profile, you completed a debrief, you were explaining a DiSC concept, anything where you were conscious of using DiSC and its effects. So I'm sure you can guess how this one ties into today's topic. With regards to DiSC style, this is just an interesting one that we like to do to get a bit of an idea of the demographic that we've got on for the next half hour, and we can all sort of get to know our virtual neighbours, so to speak. And so on this note, just for myself, so that I'm not just a hidden voice on your screens for the next 30 minutes. My name's Samantha Pilz. Like I said, I've been with Integro now for over a year, and I do a little bit of everything here, really. With regards to these two questions, personally, I'm a C style, and the last time I used DiSC was just this morning when I was preparing for a virtual facilitation that I'll be doing this afternoon. So if you guys could all just complete these two quick questions, we will get started in just a minute. All right, so in regards to our first question, DiSC style for the group, we have a predominance of I styles here with us this morning. So hopefully we'll try and keep it nice and interesting and moving along for you guys. 25% I style, and then we have quite a few ISSIs and also D styles, and then a few other C styles along with myself. So probably in the minority, but people are still coming along. All right, and so now the second poll is up on your screen, and this one's the last time you used DiSC personally. So jump on and let us know. Fantastic. So majority of you already within the last week. So good to see. Only we've got about 10% of you saying that the last time you used DiSC was over 6 months ago. And obviously at the moment, we do have a slightly different curve, I'm sure, due to COVID, but hopefully, well, we're obviously breaking that habit now, and we're going to discuss DiSC a little bit. So thank you, guys. We'll just close that one. All right, and with that, it is 11:01, so let's get started. All right, so on today's agenda, we are going to go through exactly what I mean by keeping DiSC alive. So we'll take a bit of a deeper look into what this means, which will then blend nicely into why this is such an important thing for us as facilitators and organizations to be doing. Then the how. How can we keep DiSC alive in our organizations and our clients' organizations? We'll touch on some of the resources that are available for you to use to help you do so. And then we're going to go through a few things for you to remember, some tips and tricks, and more than anything, just some things to get you thinking about how this is going to apply to you and how you can use it moving forwards. And then we will wrap up with a Q&A. So if you have any questions as we go along, please just type them into the comment section and I'll go through all of them at the end of the session. All right, so what do I mean by keeping DiSC alive? We touched on this really briefly just a moment ago as we were waiting for everyone to come in. But really what we mean by this is taking the learnings from a DiSC session and actually applying these to everyday life on an ongoing basis. So we really have to think about whether DiSC is being used to its maximum potential, if it's generating ongoing benefit to the individual, to their team, to their organization. Are people actually completing and following through on their action planning? So next steps that follow on from their profiles. And can you actually see a culture that's reaping the benefits of improved communication and understanding? So are we actually seeing the effect of DiSC or are we just going through the motions? So as a facilitator, you're providing DiSC knowledge to participants, but we know there's a lot that goes into DiSC and it can be a lot to take in during a first session. So often participants need a few reminders to actually fully absorb and understand DiSC and the full benefit. So beyond this, it takes even more to really truly be able to understand DiSC as it relates to you and to others. And we have to keep diving deeper into this to help it become a subconscious part of everyday life. So the majority of us as facilitators would understand this because it's our daily bread and butter and we're always discussing it. But we have to remember that not everyone has that benefit. So we do need to consciously help them with that. Luckily for us, everything DiSC is designed to be highly memorable. It's easy to understand and easy to apply, and it is designed for ongoing learning. So we just need to make sure that this journey of learning is actually being continued beyond the classroom and that first session and being applied on an ongoing basis so that it's actually integrated as part of an organization's culture. So on this topic, we're going to have our final 2 polls for the day. So I know I've got a few more in here, but these are all points of interest. And the first one is going to be whether you think your organization actively keeps DiSC alive currently. And I know as consultants, most of you, this will be yes, obviously, using DiSC every day. But for a lot of organizations, I'd be intrigued to see how actively you feel your organization is keeping DiSC alive. So we have at the moment a relatively even split between whether yes, organizations are referring to DiSC all the time, and then also not really. So we have about 50% of people saying that not really, and they haven't actively used DiSC apart from in sessions. So this is showing that there's a little bit of a gap here. So we'll close that one. And then the second poll, following on from this, is why do you think organizations struggle to keep DiSC alive? So in your particular circumstance, why do you think it is that your organization isn't keeping DiSC alive? And if you select other, so if it's not a lack of time, a lack of budget, or a lack of knowledge on how to do this, and you're selecting others, I would love for you to pop this into the comments section, what you think this actually is. Okay, so 43% of you have selected other. So let's see. Okay, unfortunately, that's unfortunate to hear, Andrew. We've got a lack of interest. So obviously on behalf of the organisation, a lack of interest in keeping it alive. Definitely a shame since they've gone to that early effort of actually implementing it. Because organisations are using other products, yep, definitely. No proper follow-up, people not really understanding the benefits and how it creates value. So some very, very valid points, and I would agree with all of them. Okay, so from that, we ended up with about 40% saying a lack of knowledge. So that'll be the lack of know-how, which hopefully we will address for you today. Nice to see that 0% said lack of budget, so that's good to see. Lack of time, 21%, and then the rest is other with some of those suggestions. So thank you for that. We will close that and we'll start to get into, well, one, we're going to touch on why it's important, and I'm sure the majority of you do already understand this. There are so many reasons why it's important to keep DiSC alive. There's so much value to it, and I've just popped up on the screen some of the things that immediately popped to mind for me in terms of even the value for money, creating engagement, healthy culture, communication, goes on and on. But what we can do is we can look at it in the way that we know every DiSC profile follows a really nice structure. So we learn about DiSC itself, its dimensions. We learn about ourselves, why we behave in the ways that we do, and some insights into learning how to recognize this. We learn about others and how to modify our behavior to those around us. So that's a really, really generic overview of it, but you can see there's 3 clear steps. So this is providing a path for development, even just through the profile itself. It's a really progressive structure, and you can actually see that it's quite closely linked to the development of emotional intelligence. So starting with awareness in ourselves, moving into others and awareness of others. So we learn from the first theoretical steps to the end process, which in a workplace sense is providing the soft skills to relate to the range of people that we work with on a daily basis. So this is the path through the profile itself, and it always concludes on a taking action. It's got action planning at some stage through it. And we have participants actually set their action plans for continuing DiSC beyond the session. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing it clearly, but they certainly should be. And another way to look at this is you can explain it to people that everyone goes to work and they will have a code of conduct, which is providing guidelines on their behavior and how their workplace expects them to behave. Now, even though we all know this, we aren't walking around and consciously thinking about how we can or can't speak to colleagues, but it's sort of an ingrained expectation that we don't even think about it. So we know how we're meant to behave and what's appropriate, but it's certainly still hard because, especially if we're under stress, we might have to consciously stop ourselves from snapping at a colleague who's interrupting us at a bad time and they need a favor from us and you've got a massive deadline. So we know that we can't lose the plot at them, but that's often just where it ends. We know we can't do it, and that's very frustrating. But so rather than just telling people what they can and can't do, we need to give them an understanding of why they feel the urge to act in a certain way, and understand how this will affect others. And then we give them the skills to adapt so that they can read the situation and respond accordingly. So because DiSC is a resource for improving communication, understanding ourselves, and learning how to relate better to others, we don't change our behaviors because there's a set of rules that says we have to behave in a certain way if we want to keep our jobs. But because we've actually been informed how we can do this and how we can communicate and behave better with others. So that makes it a really powerful tool. And it's also creating a cycle that if we can keep DiSC alive in an organization, this will eventually create a subconscious culture of understanding, which in turn creates a better organizational culture to work in. But the key point here is that culture is developed through consistent work. It doesn't just appear overnight. And so to have that consistent culture, it's the same with keeping DiSC alive. This is something we have to address consistently. So keeping DiSC alive is where we see the true value of it. We're learning about ourselves and others, and we really want to avoid that instance where once the session's over, participants just put their profile in a drawer and DiSC style doesn't really have any more meaning to them. So if we can keep this going after the session, we can help to embed DiSC into individuals' everyday lives, which will contribute to the overall organizational culture, get everyone speaking the same language, and improving the organization of what's motivating them and others and how to behave. All right, so why you're really here is the how. How can we as facilitators encourage continual use of everything DiSC? All right, so one of the things that I want you to walk away with is that a lot of the tips that I'm going to give you, they don't necessarily require any further money being spent. They're things that anyone can do. Some of them require more time than others, but not many of them require a whole lot of time. This is something that once you've made that initial commitment to completing DiSC, then organizations may as well invest just that little bit more time and energy into really making it stick and seeing the true value. So everything DiSC was actually created with organizations specifically in mind. So currently over 45 million people in over 75 countries have used Everything DiSC. Everything DiSC Workplace being the most popular. But if we just think about it and we imagine that if all 45 million of those people were actually continuing their DiSC knowledge and understanding on a daily basis, the impact that this could be having on a global workplace culture. All right, and as we go through as well, if you have any other ideas or ways that you help organizations to keep DiSC alive, then please do let us know because we'd love to hear them. But the first thing, and this sounds really basic, but sadly isn't always done, especially in organizations or in-house, but every DiSC profile should be debriefed. And whether this is done one-on-one or it's done via a group or team facilitation, it isn't important. But we also now have a lot of support materials. So the debriefs and facilitations can be completed either virtually or in a face-to-face setting. So this is giving us some really nice flexibility here. But what's important is that your participant has actually understood their profile, the intent of it, and they've got a clear path for what's expected of them and what they need to do next. So the debrief is where you're actually laying the foundations and giving people that understanding. And we would also stress that a key part of the debrief is the supplement for facilitators report that comes with every profile. We always provide this to participants at the time of their debrief and we leave it with them. So because it's going into a little bit more of an in-depth look into why their profiles come out the way it has, this is really good for explaining to them why they have come out the style that they have. And the more buy-in you can get to that, that's where you're really going to see them embrace their profile and want to further it. All right, so briefly going through what we will cover in a debrief. I know a lot of you do this all the time, but very key that if we're not debriefing a profile properly, the odds are that, or we're not debriefing a profile at all, odds are that the participant's just going to have a quick flick through of their profile. They'll have a look at their dot location, what their style is, you know, might be happy, might not be, depending on any prejudices they have about DiSC, and they're going to leave it at that. So that's why debriefing is so important and they're really understanding the value. So you'll cover what DiSC is and why they've done this profile in the first place. So what do they expect to get out of it? This moves really nicely into the cornerstone principles, which are key to making sure that people are understanding their profile in the intent that was behind it. So unfortunately, there are a lot of misconceptions out there regarding DiSC and what style people think they would like to be, but we don't want this to cloud their first impression of their profile. So cornerstone principles, very important. Going through their style, their inclination, and we always get participants to personalize their profile, which is a key part of getting their buy-in. So lots of questions, making sure they understand, and actually laying that proper groundwork. As I already mentioned, DiSC always provides a really nice framework for continuing a participant's development, which makes your job as a facilitator much easier. So here you can see I've got a little snippet from page 16 of the workplace profile, of my workplace profile, which is showing the action planning. And so like I said, every DiSC profile has some form of action planning through it. For example, the productive conflict profile has personalization action planning on multiple pages through 10, 11, 19, 20. Agile EQ also has personalized tips the whole way through it and designated action planning to wrap up on page 26. So all of the DiSC profiles you can have a flick through, see where the action planning is, but this is really the most essential step and a really nice wrap up for every single debrief. So you're setting a really clear path and the expectation as to what that participant is going to do next. All right, and this can also be furthered through myeverythingdisc.com. So we'll touch on this a little bit later as well to really get into depth, but it is a key part of the debrief. You may not have a chance to go through myeverythingdisc.com with them, but definitely introduce it to them and they can go away and have a little bit of a play and investigate themselves. After your debrief, this is where potentially you might engage in follow-up sessions. This is based on conversations you have with the organization, how well you think the group picked up on DISC, even down to the amount of time that you had. So if you don't have time in your initial session to get through everything, this is where reviews and follow-ups come into play, whether they're group or one-on-one. Often participants will go away, think about DISC a little bit more, and then they have some more time to process, analyze their results, and they'll come up with more questions that they may not have thought about in your session. So this is where having that option and that open communication path for them to come and ask questions is really going to encourage them to continue using DISC. So we're encouraging them to continue promoting the language and understanding their profile. You can also in future sessions go a little bit deeper into the profile because, especially at the moment in a virtual setting, our virtual sessions, we are having to keep them a little bit shorter to keep people's attention spans. So we're not getting to go into the same depth that we used to with face-to-face. So you may need follow-up reports, follow-up sessions, so that rather than trying to cram everything into one session, really make sure they're absorbing it and then plan future ones to go through more materials. So following on from this, DISC in the workplace. So this may not seem like a facilitator's domain, but it definitely is. We want organizations to be continuing DISC on a day-to-day basis. That's the whole idea of keeping DISC alive. But there are a number of suggestions that you can propose to your clients post-session to make sure that they're getting the best value out of DISC and the groundwork that you're setting with their staff members. So just to give you a few ideas as to what this could look like, organizations can, or teams can review DISC in team trainings, team meetings. So you can allocate 10 to 15 minutes for people to have a look at profiles or comparison reports, discuss any questions they might have. Someone might have read something interesting about DISC, but the point is that they're talking about it, it's being kept front of mind, and people are really understanding it and furthering that knowledge, and they're sharing it. So DISC is something that can be used repeatedly. You can have so many different conversations around it. So definitely allocating 10 to 15 minutes, even shorter, is just good to keep people thinking about it. Organizations, teams can generate comparison reports between them. They can have a look at their team map that you might have left with them from a facilitator report. They can create style guides together. We'll go through a few more of these a bit later, but there's so many different ideas. The point is that they're talking about it on a continual basis. Something else that is a really good way to use DISC is in performance reviews, which are typically dreaded by everyone. But if organizations are thinking about using participants' DISC profiles, this can help them have a more constructive, non-judgmental style of feedback. It's giving their manager an idea of how to approach the participant, the situation, and as well, it's giving them some research-backed insights. And this is always going to help with constructive strategies for development. So even again, that action planning, that could be part of their development planning. So see how they're going, set some action planning, and also this can help hold them accountable. So other ways that you can incorporate DISC into day-to-day in an organization is personal development planning or setting KPIs, action planning between managers or mentors and participants. You can create little style guides to put on staff members' desks. You can plot team members on team maps via their facilitator reports or through myeverythingdisc.com. If someone new joins a team, this is where you can have some really good discussions around DISC, the newcomer style, and existing styles in the group. So another point that you can do is that you can build on from DiSC. So typically the workplace profile is the foundation profile or a really good starting point, but it doesn't have to be the end of the journey. So what you can do is you can expand on from the DiSC workplace profile with further profiles that might be more specific to the individual's goals and what it is that they're hoping to achieve in their career. So you might have them complete an Agile EQ profile if they want to work more on their emotional intelligence and adapting their mindsets. But there are 7 Everything DiSC profiles that are available for use. Everyone has all 7 in their Epic account. So you can also download samples of all of these from our website or directly from your Epic account, and just start having a think about what might be the best next step for your participants, especially if you're working ongoing or you have a close relationship with an organization. All right, so there's some of the ideas of things that you can do, but now we're going to have a look at some of the resources that are available with all DiSC profiles. So for example, we're going to touch on myeverythingdisc.com, style guides, group culture and facilitator reports, comparison reports, quick DiSC, and DiSC in depth. So you'll know some of these are complementary resources that you can use at no additional cost. Some of them do have an additional cost, but again, it's just picking what's right for your participant and your client. So starting with myeverythingdisc.com, this is a fantastic resource. It is completely free with every DiSC profile. So there's definitely no reason not to be using this. Once you've completed your initial session with participants, you'll grant them access to this through your Epic account. And so hopefully you're all very familiar with this, but just as a quick recap, it's a free online portal. Participants have to have completed a DiSC profile to get access. And from this, people can access their profiles, so they can refer to them at any stage. They can request comparison reports with team members. They can plot their team out on a DiSC map, listen to podcasts on their style, and there's also a number of activities in there where they can learn about DiSC, their style, and the styles of others. So because it's free, there's so much information in there, there's no reason not to use this as a follow-up. So you can set this as homework for participants, or go into it a little bit more in a follow-up session. But one thing to note is that you give access to this after your session and not before, because participants can see their profiles in there, and you don't want them peeking at this before you get to your session. So there's also a tab in there for anyone that's done a DiSC sales profile, where you can plot customers, work out their DiSC style, and then also get personalized tips on how to adapt your selling style to their buying style. So that's a really nice additional one that comes with the sales profile. Comparison reports, same boat as My Everything DiSC in that they are complimentary, they're free with DiSC profiles, and unlimited. People can request as many of these as they like. So I really hope you already know about them, and I'm preaching to the choir. But these are something that you can include in your facilitation. You can pair people off and have them go through comparison reports. It's a really good way to show the value and the depth of Everything DiSC. So there's a lot more information in this. Participants can also request them from myeverythingdisc.com. But for example, one way that we use these to keep DiSC alive here at Integro is that every time we have someone new join the team, every other team member completes a comparison report with them, and we'll take the time to sit down and debrief it together. So we actually go through and personalize it, and we'll allocate the time to do that properly. So maybe 45 to 60 minutes, and really get to know each other. So this is a really nice way to get some insights into working with each other. And while it may not work the same way in massive organizations, you can certainly always do it with direct teams. And because it's a complementary resource, it's a really nice way to be bringing DiSC up, keeping it front of mind. All right, style guides. This is something that I mentioned organizations can do together in team meetings. But what you can do is you'll see on the right that little graphic, if you haven't seen them before, they come as little printouts. And so what you do is you'll have your DiSC style plotted on them. And it comes with 3 dot points where you can write how to work effectively with me. So here in the office, we have these sitting on our desks so that as soon as someone approaches you, they're effectively seeing a cheat sheet of your DiSC style and how you like to communicate and work with people. So for example, here, we've got a DiSC style worker who likes to limit the small talk, focus on solutions and say it how it is. So even if an S-style person approaches them with an issue or a question, they can immediately work out that the best way to approach the person to get the best possible result is by adhering to these 3 tips. So even though their natural instinct might be that they're going to come up and be really supportive and slowly build into what they want to say, they can make a conscious effort to be more concise, make sure they've thought their query through, and they're proposing solutions as well as problems. So, you know, they're not going to sugarcoat what they're saying like they might be naturally inclined to do. So this is going to create more effective interactions in the workplace. It's also a nice little reminder for everyone as to what their team's DiSC styles are. And an alternative to this that I've seen done a couple of times is, obviously we're in an age of digital communication, hot desking, people are moving around a lot more, but you can also have your DiSC style and like a style guide as part of your email signature. So I've seen that before, which is a really nice little sort of personal touch. If you're sending out an email, they're getting some actionable tips about you, and it's just a nice little personal touch to an email that could otherwise be a little bit impersonal. All right, so group culture and facilitator reports, really, really insightful. They work on helping you identify a group's DiSC culture. They'll have issues to consider section. They propose solutions. Most of you as facilitators would already use one or both of these. And I would recommend leaving this with your client after the session so that the client can refer back to it and actually follow up on it. So teams can leave this in a place that everyone's got access to, or if teams are changing and new staff members are joining, old ones leaving, you can update this for your client and generate a new one which will give some insights into that team's culture. The main thing to remember, and as page 3 of the group culture report puts it, is that group culture is the way that we do things. So this is a really nice little insight for organizations. Typically, we always choose to use the facilitator report, so the one on the right, for our sessions, which also focuses on the group's DiSC culture, but it has a little bit more of an overall focus. The biggest difference, however, is that the facilitator report is specifically looking at individuals. So we know by name the individuals and we plot them and identify their individual styles, whereas the group culture is actually completely anonymous. So it's looking at the overall group rather than the individuals within it. That's probably the way to differentiate. All right, both of these activities, Quick DiSC and DiSC in Depth, are used at our certification courses, so I'm sure many of you are familiar with them. Obviously, we can't be using them in a virtual environment at the moment, but they are really good fun for face-to-face sessions, follow-ups, or even just to leave with organizations and they can do them internally. But starting with Quick DiSC, it's a really fun little icebreaker exercise. There are many ways that you can alter this as well. So it comes with a little instruction set, but you can come up basically with your own rules as to how you want to use this. And it's also just a reminder for people as to the different traits that are characteristic of DiSC styles without specifically labeling them. Over on the right there as well, we have DiSC in Depth, which is more of a fun little game. It's a bit of a refresher, a little bit of a test on everyone's knowledge of DiSC and the differences between the styles. So we're really keeping the language around this alive. This would be a really good one to use in team meetings. So as a little bit of a team building exercise, you can incorporate this, split people off into groups and use it as a competition sort of style, or you can use it as a bit of a starter for any follow-up sessions you do, so you can test where people's DiSC knowledge is at and how much they've remembered from the first session. All right. So before we wrap up, because we are at the half an hour that I promised, I just wanted to touch very, very, very briefly on an upcoming product that we've just heard of from Wiley. So this one will tie in really nicely with the whole concept of keeping DiSC alive, and it's going to be called Culture Catalyst. So Workplace on Catalyst is going to be the first product released in the coming months. And while we're not going into it right now, I do just want to say, please make sure you're subscribed to our newsletters and watching our website, because we will be releasing further information on this very, very shortly. So that will be a really good one to assist with keeping DiSC alive, and another little fun tool to add to the arsenal. So keep that one in mind. And so just before we finish up, I just want to say that communication really is key. It's essentially what DiSC is all about. So we want people to be having effective communication with each other and understanding one another better. So leading by example is also key. Whether you're a facilitator or a team leader in an organization or a CEO, being open and transparent with regards to DiSC is the best way to keep it alive. So acknowledging everyone's value, reinforcing cornerstone principles, being open about your style, your needs, both during the session and on a day-to-day basis is really the way to keep DiSC alive. So open communication always. And also lastly, yes, we will be sending a recording of this webinar out to everyone. And I hope it was useful for some of you, even if that was just to get you thinking about some new little tips and tricks and tools that you want to use in your facilitations. As always, please feel free to reach out. You can contact our support team on that support@integro.com.au if you had any orders, questions about Epic. Also, please feel free to reach out directly to myself. My email is just samantha@integro.com.au. All our emails follow the same structure. But I would always love to hear from you, especially if you had any suggestions of ways that you are keeping DiSC alive in your organization. So just having a quick look now at our any questions? Okay. Okay, so with the interest in ongoing virtual workshops, do you think you could develop some good online options to replace Quick DiSC and DiSC in depth? I would be very keen to utilize something. Rachel Moore. Yes, Rachel, there are a few. I'm not sure if you've seen, Wiley did release a virtual facilitation guide to go along with the kits. One of the really nice features of that is towards the end, it comes up with suggestions for alternate activities that you can include. So if you haven't seen one of these, please let me know. I did also do a recent session on creating a virtual DiSC session. The use of polls is a really good feature, polls, chats, and breakout rooms. So feel free to reach out. I will send you an email after the session. Claire Hogarth, we only use workplace profiles. Can we use the culture, emotional intelligence, and conflict reports without me having extra training? So I'm assuming there you're talking about the certification, Claire, which is based around the workplace profile. You can use any of the 7 DiSC profiles from that certification because the knowledge and training that goes behind them is the same. So yes, you can use and debrief and facilitate them without needing any extra training. Fantastic. And there are kits that go with 6 of the DiSC workplace profiles. The 363 is the only one that doesn't have its own kit. And they are a great supporting resource as well. So thank you for the reminder. Just having a look. All right. So in the Q&A. How much will the culture gauge be, Kirk? I'm not too sure what you mean by the culture gauge, but I will send you an email after the session, Kirk, and we can discuss that. So thanks for doing this. Are there a list of team building exercises or games on the Integro website that can be used in workshops? No, we don't have one currently on the website. We do have those DiSC in-depth cards that come with instructions, but in terms of some alternate exercises, I'd be more than happy to discuss that with you. Anyone that has any suggestions, feel free to send them through as well. They do have the virtual activity suggestions in the virtual facilitation guide. So that's a really good starting point at the moment. But I will also reach out to you and we can have a bit more of a discussion around that. Catherine, is there an additional cost for the group culture report or the facilitator report? Yes, there is. They're both 25 credits each. So that is a resource that does have an additional cost to it. So something to bear in mind. And I believe that is all of our questions. But like I said, if you do have any follow-up questions or there's anything you think about after the session, please do feel free to reach out, and thank you very much for joining me. Hope you all have a great day.